Welcome to this webinar on safeguarding children, ensuring best outcomes at a time of increasing pressure and decreasing resources. First of all, some introductions. My name is Terry McCarthy. I have 30 years experience of safeguarding, including holding a number of senior management posts. I've also worked with authorities that have required improvement, so I have an excellent sense of what good practice and poor practice can look like. I left my most recent post about 2 years ago in order to focus on developing safeguarding practice. This has led to the Impact for Children website and a book that will be published shortly by Jessica Kingsley called The Common Sense Guide to Child Safeguarding. I recommend you take a look at the website. There's a lot of material you can download for free there. And the website's on the screen at the moment. Okay, so enough introductions. The focus of today's session. We're going to look at examining the increasing pressure and decreasing resources impacting on child safeguarding practice. We'll consider the potential effect of this pressure on social workers and their managers, and we'll explore how practice can be developed under these pressures. So let's start by looking at the increasing pressure. The Ofsted framework, which came in last November, has so far found that the majority of children's services it has inspected require an improvement or inadequate. I think it's about 2/3 of those that the reports have been published. This puts a massive pressure on all children's services who are expecting the Ofsteds over the next couple of years. Referrals, assessments, looked after numbers have all been on the increase for many years now. There's also been a rise in poverty. The Institute for Fiscal Studies estimated last year 600,000 children were living in poverty, and a lot more displaced families. Recently we've seen that from Syria and Iraq. Higher expectation of the public, elected members, service users, and generally the complexity of work has increased as we've learnt more and more about the key aspects lying behind the mistreatment of children, domestic violence, substance misuse, mental health. More is expected, more and more guidance, more and more higher expectations. And very recently, of course, we've seen with the Rotherham case, the child sexual exploitation is now a new major national issue. And tighter timescales for courts. So a lot of extra pressure on social workers. And this is at a time of decreasing resources. Austerity measures, it's estimated that with a current Conservative government, there will be a 43% reduction in resources available to local authorities. Other partner agencies, health agencies, the police, probation, voluntary sector, are all under financial pressures as well. And this has resulted in retrenching more into the core business. For the police, it's detection of crime, and prosecution. For health, it's identifying illness and treating it. And while safeguarding is still very much within their range of responsibilities, it's fair to say that their available time for safeguarding responsibilities is probably reducing, and it's becoming much more children's services role. Pressure and morale have led to recruitment and retention problems. We've had a wage freeze now for many years. There's been a reduction in administrative support and managerial support. There's been a sense that these can be stripped out of children's services, but it means there's less available for practitioners and managers that are there. And services are reduced across the voluntary sector, and family support, youth and domestic violence services are particularly being hit. Women's refuges have reported last year that 150 women are turned away every day from their refuges who are suffering domestic violence, and many of those have children. So what impact may this have on social workers and social work managers? Complex caseloads, higher caseloads, more uncomplicated work, increasing focus on the high-risk cases, the high-end cases, safeguarding and the looked-after cases. Many social workers are feeling overwhelmed, frustrated, out of control, unable to cope with the pressures on them. And working with high levels of fear, anxiety and stress. Sickness, staff turnover, vacancy levels are all being affected by this, and many workers are are starting early, finishing late, skipping lunch, working when sick. And increasing dissatisfaction from families and partner agencies, more complaints and more general grumbling about decisions that children's services are making. So given that we have the pressure, increased pressure, reduced resources, that impact that's having on practitioners, what is the possible effects that's going to have on effective practice? There tends to be, at times of pressure, there's a tendency for managers to be much more directive and performance indicator driven. It's easier to measure what is quantifiable, and visits, supervisions, whether a child's been seen, core groups, conferences, etc., are very good for quantitative measurements. There's a tendency to stick to that. This can lead people to be much more process driven. People focusing on the tasks that are being measured. Nobody wants to get into trouble, so they focus on those things that senior managers are going to be particularly on top of. There's a tendency to avoid the challenging and uncertain, the qualitative, complicated aspects of casework, the difficult family, the thorny issue, the uncertain aspects, which are an inevitable part of safeguarding. And this, of course, all leads to less reflectiveness, less creative work, less flexibility and ability to take on new ideas. There is a tendency under pressure to stick to patterns that are tried and tested and safe. They are safe, but they're also limited, and they're unlikely to lead to the kind of exploratory work and creative and reflective work that is probably essential if we're going to get good outcomes for children. There's less energy and drive to think the unthinkable, manage the unmanageable, be reasonable to the unreasonable. And all this leads to oversights, misjudgments, loss of focus, and it can mean hundreds of hours spent on families with no tangible progress to the children. Unfocused work will sap up the energy and resources. I've chaired many meetings where little has changed over the previous year or so, and it's clear that enormous amounts of energy have gone in to the case and visiting the families and recording and completing assessments and reports and so forth. But the child themselves is still suffering the same level of neglect or mistreatment that they were a year or so ago. So this is a lack of focus and a tendency just to follow the process. So the big question is, what's the answer? Three things I'm going to be suggesting here. The first one is we have to address our relationships with families. We need to ensure there's a focus with families regarding what is expected of them to ensure the children are safe and well. There's a free download you can get from the Impact for Children website. I'll flag up the name of the address of that at the end of the session. But this document is called Ensuring Clarity of Involvement with Families, and looks and has a draft letter that you can use with families to be clear what's expected. We have to have higher expectations of immediate change. We simply don't have the time with the limited resources to spend 2 or 2.5 years with a family unless there's real change taking place over that period. And if things are getting stuck, we need to be taking alternative action, particularly legal intervention needs to be considered. I tend to think that within the first 6 months of involvement with the family, that's the white hot area, that's the period in which change is most likely to take place. If it doesn't take place in that period, it's probably never going to take place. We need to be clear about what the root problems. Root problems is the fundamental problems. These are very limited numbers: alcohol abuse, drugs, domestic violence, criminal behaviour, untreated mental health problems, learning disability, emotional needs of families. These really fundamental issues which lead to children being neglected and mistreated. We need to be clear what those are and have a plan to address those root problems. We need to focus the balance on the problem and the solution. We have a tendency, I think, to focus on what has happened to the child, what investigations have been done, what people have said at various times. This is probably understandable at times of pressure because these are very quantifiable and tangible things to focus on. However, whilst that's important to have that and to be clear about the accountability that goes with that, it's equally important to move forward to a solution, to the forward-thinking aspects. And this is much more challenging, much more qualitative. It's all about engaging with the family, understanding their strengths and opportunities. And there's no performance indicator for this in the same way as there would be for, say, visits or conferences or supervision sessions or whatever. So we need to work with children to understand the problem. I think the main argument for working with children is that if things are changing, you'll see that when you talk to the child. If they're not changing, you'll be very clear that when you talk to the child. So it's a very, very good way to monitor success and whether good change is taking place. If the child is happier and issues, they seem less worried, better going to school, happier at school, happy to come home, watch a bit of TV, get to bed on time, feel happy around their room and with their family members, it's every likelihood that the fundamental root problems are being shifted for the better. So that's a good argument for working with children, apart from the fact it helps us understand what the issues really are. The second key area we need to focus on is developing the workforce so it can engage effectively with families. All visits, meetings, recordings have to focus on the key aspects of the case. They need to satisfy the crucial aspects that are trying to be achieved. I had a manager once that used to say that when you're going out for a visit, what are you trying to achieve in that visit? What are the 2 or 3 things that you absolutely are going to be talking about? And be very clear about that. This kind of picks up on the Pareto principle, sometimes referred to as the 80-20 rule, which argues that a relatively small number of tasks will result in the vast majority of benefit. The 80-20 is used as a figurative measurement, but basically suggesting that 20% of tasks will result in 80% of benefit. These are the key tasks or key element of tasks that we need to be very focused on at times of limited resources, because they get us massive benefit. One way of looking at that is if you had a visit to a family and you only had 10 or 15 minutes for that visit, what would you focus on? How would you spend that 10 or 15 minutes to ensure that real change was taking place, or that the children were doing better? So that's a Pareto principle. We need to focus not only on what is required, but how this can be achieved. The quantitative performance indicators talk about what needs to happen. It's all about what's. But they don't talk about how this is achieved. And most workers, I think, are fairly clear about what they need to do, but they struggle with how they're going to achieve this. And this is something we need to be building in the confidence and resources of our staff. We need to be clear about the nature of change and what is expected and by when, and the process of motivating people. The next webinar on the 14th of October will focus on some of these cultural issues, and change is one of those. We need to continuously evaluate risk and change and where the solutions are really working. And cases which are not progressing, as we've already said, need to be escalated to senior managers, core groups, legal planning meetings, conferences. We cannot accept if things are staying the same, and that's not acceptable, then we really need to be escalating those cases. And we need to develop a clarity of involvement with partner agencies regarding working with children in low-risk situations, gathering information, using them as part of the assessment process, the evaluative analysis of information, the planning, and some joint intervention as well. Continuing with developing the workforce, we need to ensure that all staff are fit to practice and have clear, continuous professional development using appraisals and development logs. On the website Impact for Children, there's a skill, 15 areas of skill which are on one of the documents there, which are an expansion of the College of Social Work performance development framework. But I've expanded some of their capabilities to give us a bit more information that we may be very, very helpful in developing skills against. We need to be developing the skills and confidence using coach and supervision, learning events, observations, practice guidance, audits and case consultation, and this is something that Impact for Children offers and with teams. Recognises the fears, anxiety and conflicts inherent in practice. Again, there's details of a free download you can have from the website. We need to use capability and conduct procedures to address performance and conduct issues. There's no getting away from this. As resources get tighter and the pressures get greater, we really have to be ensuring that all staff are working to an acceptable standard. Okay, the third area that we need to be focusing on is the culture, and ensuring this enables and leads the staff. Peter Drucker said, "Culture eats strategy for breakfast," and I think it was a very perceptive comment in terms of, with all the strategic documents in the world, the feel of the office, the attitude, the way people talk to each other, the way in which people are motivated, the way we do things around the workplace, the culture is going to be have a much greater impact on performance. We need to develop a managerial and a leadership approach. This could be the subject of a whole webinar, but in broad terms, managerial is in a limited sense is when you tell somebody what to do and you monitor whether they've done it. And leadership is about helping people to motivate themselves and develop their own ideas and explore and expand and be creative. Now, both of those have their pluses and negatives, and I suggest that a blend of those two together is what will give us the best outcome. We need to promote positive relationships across everyone who's involved in the safeguarding environment, and those involve respect, empathy, clear expectations, constructive use of authority, which again we'll focus on at the next webinar on the 14th of October. We'll recognise that positive relationships exist between the whole culture is made up of managers, partner agencies, manager to practitioner relationship, practitioner to parent relationship, and parent to child. This is the environment, the culture of safeguarding, and the way in which each of those talk to each other is crucial. And a practitioner is more likely to be respectful and empathetic with a parent if that practitioner's manager is respectful and empathetic to him or her. We need to ensure a learning environment that motivates and ensures best outcomes. And we need to monitor using a range of quantitative and qualitative measures. The qualitative much more time-consuming, much more difficult to construct and to use, but incredibly important given us the wealth of information about effectiveness. So finally, we're going to focus on, I think, an important cultural issue, which is the over-reliance on direction, performance monitoring and procedures. This is your performance indicators, managers being very clear about what's expected, timescales and so forth, and what procedures and policies and protocols need to be followed. These are very effective for straightforward or critical issues, straightforward being where the answer is very, very clear, and critical being, again, where a good example of critical would be a fire alarm where everyone needs to get out of the building. It's a serious situation. Action needs to be taken immediately. These respond very well to procedures and direction. However, most safeguarding situations are highly complex, or sometimes referred to as wicked, with situations and issues, options, commitments, always changing, emerging, mutating, really lacking. It's very difficult to understand what exactly is going on until perhaps the case is towards the end of the case. So it requires a lot of skills in being creative, flexible, tenacious, evaluation, perseverance. These cannot be found in written documents. It can only come from the skill sets of practitioners and managers. And whilst guidance and procedures offer a good framework, they're not on their own effective in assisting in the interventions. I might offer some checklists and timescales and some things to be aware of, but we're really looking at the skill development of practitioners and their managers in order to get this done. And staff require support and the opportunity to explore and balance issues. And this is where the coaching comes in addition to supervision. This is where live observation comes in, case consultation comes in, and audits can come in to really start to dig into what's happening on cases. So quick summary, the demand and expectations are increasing. There's high pressures on social workers. We must find new ways to practice, more focused with families and clear about what is expected. Social workers must develop a whole skill, resilience, confidence and stability to take on this challenge and be much more qualitative in their interventions. And we must rethink the working culture to support this. Okay, for further information, please feel free to contact me. Here's the phone numbers you can use and the website and an email address. So, so finally a little ad. The next webinar is on the 14th of October at 8 o'clock in the evening. It's the first of 3 webinars looking at the 3 stages, the 3 steps of the Impact for Children program. So this one's really going to focus on culture and developing a culture which enables and leads. The second one will be developing staff, and the third one will be developing relationships with families. So, but this first one is going to be about culture. And we're going to look further at learning environment, understanding change, healthy and effective relationships, and the 3 heavies: authority, accountability and responsibility. Really important in safeguarding. And again, looking more at the qualitative and quantitative performance. Email me at this address, at my email address here, Sean, if you want to join, and I'll send you how to link up on that webinar. So many thanks for joining this webinar or viewing this webinar. Thank you.